the research paper that I'm going to sort of present to you is a paper called Inspiring Enabling Local Communities and Integrated Local Delivery Framework for Communities in the Environment, or Localism in the Environment. And it was funded, as I say, through the very great hard work of Graham when he was with Natural England, because of the work that we were doing, and well written by Chris, who you'll meet later. Can I have the next slide, please? So I was one of the first project officers for Heritage Lottery Landscape Scale Partnerships. The Heritage Lottery decided in 2002 that it would have 5 pilots to see if you put people out into the countryside to actually work out what was needed, what would happen and what was missing and what were the opportunities. So it was part of something called the Caring for the Cotswolds project. I was the grassland officer. It was a £2.4 million project, very much probably like one of the ones that you have here, and the ones that Julie was talking about in relation to Common Land. It was a 5-year project. It had 34 partners. And what we wanted to do was to look and see what were the issues. We had 94 sites, and we had nearly 30 complex commons through Gloucestershire. And the framework that has come out of that what we learned over those 5 years, has now been further researched by Chris and others, and been presented both locally, regionally, nationally and internationally. And what I'm going to try and go on to show you is how what we learned from the way that we work on commons, that we now think we can help to offer an opportunity for people to become more prepared and resilient to climate change. Can I have the next slide, please? So, as I say, the issue that we had initially was that there was all this unmanaged limestone grassland commons. They were actually sort of like very, very diverse, exactly as the common land that you have here. There were still commoners, so the picture on the far side there is Minchin Hampton Common, and there were lots of different stakeholders that were interested and had a view. Can I have the next slide, please? So, and that's perfect, thank you. So what we worked out about very quickly was the fact that there were lots and lots of different stakeholders, which you'll be aware of here in the New Forest, but those stakeholders at the time weren't working together at all. They had no coordination, sometimes that their agendas conflicted, and that there was this complex web of governance that was sort of like over these protected areas that included things like the protected landscape. Obviously it's an AONB, not a national park like you are here. We had geological designations, we had scheduled monument designations, we had water catchments, we had all the different things, protected species legislation, but nobody was really looking at who actually lived there, as Lindsay was saying, and didn't value this extraordinary knowledge that people had of their local environment, or respect that knowledge. And for me, I found that really extraordinary, because I'd grown up in the Cotswold farms with my parents, who were zoologists and botanists, as well as being farmers, and we knew everything that lived on our land. We knew where the kingfishers fished, we knew where the dippers sang, we knew everything, and did bird surveys and botanical surveys. So I found, as a project officer, it was really bizarre that actually, when you're looking for the long-term sustainable management of these wonderful sites, why would you not ask the people who not only know and love the way that they've been managed, but also the detail in many cases of that biodiversity? And there seemed to be, and there still is, sadly, in a lot of commons, a lot of lack of trust and respect for all the different stakeholders that were involved. Can I have the next slide, please? So basically what we did over the 25 commons, about 5 years, was to start to look at a framework that could actually be shared with other people as to what was going on. And we developed, I remember Chris and I sitting in Waitrose, I think in Somerset, saying, what are we going to call this framework? And actually it was trying to work out what was going to join all this together, and how could you actually enable that trust at a local level to take place. So really, it's a very simple thing. What it does is it respects and connects to people's sense of place. This is Paul Griffiths on Edge Common near Gloucestershire, who had been displaced from his common for nearly 25 years, and it's the first day he got to put his cattle back out on the common. He knows where every butterfly is, he knows where every cowslip is, he knows the whole common better than anyone. We want to be assisters. We don't want to be leaders. We don't want to come and sort of like go in and sort of say to people, this should happen in your local area. We want to enable people locally to actually release that knowledge and actually overcome this complex web of you can't do this, you can't do that, you need a consent for that, you need funding. But we want to identify that could we deliver all of that at a local level, all of those different strategies. Can I have the next slide, please? Is it working now? Thank you. So, where's it gone? It's working too well now. we never got to. Sorry, okay. So if you look, if you take this out to an international context, you know that you hear about all these summits, particularly with very pressing environmental agendas now. We've got lots of different strategies that are coming down to try and help us with solve some of the very pressing issues with climate change. And I was at a conference the other day that said if we get to 2 degrees C warming globally, then there'll be a 25% loss of all species globally. We've got some real challenges. We've got, as we know, really extreme weather happening to us more often. We know we've got evidence now about the quality of our water that needs to be maintained. We've got the statistics around the decline of biodiversity, which is absolutely terrifying, as was alluded to this morning. So what happens is you end up with all these extraordinary complex webs of different spatial areas for targeting of your local area. And you may not be able to see it very easily, but there's just an image there of the Natural England website that you can go to, which makes it enable you to be able to see what those environmental priorities are at your local level. And those have come down from international targets, and through the national parks and AOMBs, those are very much defined and help how you can actually really understand those priorities at a local level. So if you haven't been to the Magic website, please go, because it's really informative and you can understand a lot about your local area. Ooh. If you look at the New Forest, what we've done is a bit of scoping off Magic to show you that you've got masses and masses of statutory designations. I don't need to tell you that, you know it's your local area. But with all those different statutory designations, there'll be a person or people whose job is to deliver that at a local level. So you've got an enormous number of designations, SPAs, SACs, NNRs, all of those. You've also got a huge number of protected species that you were talking about earlier on that were also very threatened potentially. And you've got a catchment that's very high in its priority for water quality. It has issues potentially with nitrates, even though I'm sure there are pristine rivers, as was alluded to earlier on. There's also a threat of pesticides. There's all sorts of different agendas that are going on in the background that we need to address as local communities. These are wider, big strategic aims, but actually they have to be delivered everywhere. They need us all to take local action. So you've also got historic environment, as you know, as you've said, and your listed parks and buildings. I don't need to tell you how beautiful your environment is. You've got all this diverse range of habitats that you need to be able to be the governance of and be your special area. So from what we talked about this morning, it sounds like you've done a really good job here in the New Forest and your relationships are really good, and that you don't necessarily need much more support in that regard, in the sense that your verderers and your communication is working really well. But to be able to understand that all of those different delivery objectives will have people from either the DEFRA family or the local authorities who actually need to come together to help us all understand how we can protect that. And of course, we've been talking very much today about the role of commoners, local farmers and residents and businesses in that delivery. So, sorry, it's being a bit naughty. So the delivery framework is basically addresses itself around parishes. So what we decided was, where can you actually put a line around people's sense of place and connectivity? How could we work out what was being successful about inspiring the local commoners that we had up in Gloucestershire, and where did they really care about? And actually we worked out that really they do care mostly about the parish in which they live. And that gave us a spatial area on which we could actually define how we could bring all those different strategies together and be meaningful at a local level, but also in relation to the way that we as people govern ourselves. By doing the scoping exercise, which I'll show you a bit more in a moment, it can clarify all the different organisations that have got an interest in your locality at that very local level, but absolutely supports the knowledge of the local community and embeds all of the delivery opportunities through the parish council and helps get the resource of the people who live there inspired to look after their piece of the world. But most importantly, what it needs is an independent facilitator who has no axe to grind, nothing other than as an assister and enabler to bring people together. It enables you to look at all those different agendas and see how that you can benefit from them, become prepared and resilient. But what it also does is facilitates multiple amounts of funding from every single different organisation that has an interest in your local area. So in some of the projects that we're involved with now, we have so much funding that we're able to do things like we're in the process of building a 0.5 kilometre long accessibility path along a river, because we're now working with all the organisations, not only the government bodies, but the water companies, the local authorities. We've had over £250,000 worth of voluntary contribution in the parishes that we've been working, because people are inspired to look after their local area. So how it works is quite simple, and now with technology and GIS and all the things that we are able to use, that's global information systems, we can start to collect the data together. This black line shows you the area of a parish council. It's like a global piece of a jigsaw, and behind that you can start to put all the different layers that are important in that part of the world. So you can put all the different targets, all the different spatial areas, and you can find out who are all the different organisations that might have an interest in that local area. And that gives you an opportunity to bring all the contacts from those organisations together. The facilitator's job is to be useful, to be enabling, to actually explain to people that all of these organisations have a bona fide reason for existing. They have things that we need as a nation to commit to in an international context. But they're also there to actually bring forward the knowledge and say to those powers that be that actually that essential local knowledge, that guardianship, is something that should be at the heart. And we're not there to impose those targets on people. We're there to inspire and enable, so that if you want to restore your river, there's somebody to help you with the complicated consents. If you want to restore a piece of land, you can get the funding or local support to do an ecological survey. So you can have eyes and ears and support and funding. But actually what's really interesting about it is how it works, is that we're now starting to realise that we can take it down a further level to start to work. We work very much through catchments because we understand the role of soil, the role of managing soil, and building organic matter will help us hugely in climate change mitigation. It will deliver those multiple public goods that the government wants us to do as land managers. And I don't know if you can see at the back, but these are actually down to field parcel levels where we can do that scoping exercise, so we can see exactly how each field, or hopefully bigger areas of forest, can actually deliver those international agendas, but at a local level. And we can work out how all the different ways that the land is being managed, not just farmers, but roads and railways and infrastructure that we've put on to the land is actually affecting us. And what we want to try and do is to work out how, as groups of parishes working along water bodies, we might be able to use the land around us by working with farms and communities to be able to become more resilient, to stop the flooding, to help recover biodiversity, to have a food supply chain if the world goes bonkers, and actually, become more resilient at a local level, but to be enabled to actually have the opportunity to do that for ourselves, and that all these complex web of organisations just become supporting of what the local community is doing in its own right. And what we've been doing with that is linking that into neighbourhood planning. I just had to put a picture of Lindsay up because every time I think of the New Forest, I just think of Lindsay. So you need fantastic people at a local level. And as Lindsay said, we're all transient. And that there may be people in a local area who are brilliant and passionate, but unfortunately we are transient. And the reason why we decided it was good to embed this framework through parish councils was because the parish, that geographical area will always be the same. It might change, but it'll be broadly similar. And there'll be a governance of that local area, and it will enable you to access all the people who live in that local area, and actually all that knowledge and information can be kept and maintained. Something that came out this morning, we can't lose this knowledge that we have at a local level, and it is being lost, and we need to capture it and save it. It's so wonderful that Lindsay's doing that, because it is vital for us going forward. So you can't see this, unfortunately, but this is all the parishes within the New Forest. And actually what's really interesting is that we've evolved this work now to move on from commons to start to look at how could you do this to make each parish resilient with its planning, with neighbourhood planning, and actually start to see whether or not farmers and communities could actually work closer together so that we could understand the environment around us and how that would benefit, and how we can integrate all the people that seem to be still needing more housing and want to come and enjoy our special areas. So we've produced with Acre, Action for Communities in Rural England, it's a guide to look at how you can actually find all the local environmental priorities, about how you can get support from all different organisations and their governance, how you can benefit, and hopefully one day we will enable each community to have access to facilitators who can actually enable the support, to delivering the complexity of governance, and enabling that to be something positive that actually people can benefit from with combined and shared resource, but also to enable them to have all that joined up funding. And the only thing to say is it actually works. So all the projects that we've been doing over the last, I think since 2004, which is when this framework was evolved at ULI Berry, and actually since it was researched in 2010, that we found that it really, really works. And basically it's just joined up partnership working with local communities being valued and supported by somebody who knows how to unpick it all and join it all back up together. And it's all about relationship building, it's all about trust, it's all about communication. Well, where we're having this slight debate is I don't believe in a world where people fight and fall out. I think it's about shared problem solving. I think that if you put the right people in to support you, that you should have a collaboration that should value all of your knowledge, all of your collective passion and all of your interests, and that should be something that goes forward. And in a sense, it sounds like that's very much what you've got with the verderers. Or you should hopefully have that and could actually expand that to those smaller communities that Lindsay was talking about. So basically this sort of sums up what Chris sort of pulled out of it all from the research is it connects communities to the farmed environment. We're not going to stop ourselves flooding, we're not going to have food and water and wildlife and all those things unless we value the people who farm the land and the communities thereon. That it's actually very much about multiple objective delivery. It's about saying, well, actually, let's not just sort of try and do one single agenda. Let's do them all because they're all complementary. It's about looking at a spatial area and bringing everything to that spatial area. And that doesn't mean that those wider shapes don't exist. They do. It just means you can start to take your piece of the world and actually make positive action. I mean, I think a lot of people I know are really worried about the state of the environment. They are worried about climate change. And I think that particularly the next generation would like to see solutions and mechanisms for us to be able to work through. It's a bespoke process, but it's replicatable. So you can actually follow a simple process. You can do the same thing in lots of places, but it's completely unique because if you do it in this parish, there'll be different stakeholders, different local communities, different agendas. But actually, we've never found a reason why we would stray from using this way of support, and it actually embeds it so that it's not transient. It is something that will be fixed within our thinking going forward. Should we expire from too much endeavour? So I suppose the idea is now, and it's been researched again, and the idea from my perspective is this a way that we could actually feel that we're making a contribution to those wider international challenges that we know we're facing? Rather than just worrying about it, could we not take a strategic, joint, shared action just over the piece of the world that we care about? And actually, if we do that, if every community does that, perhaps we've got a greater chance of actually delivering a lot of those what seem really complex and difficult agendas. So thank you very much.